Ryan Walbrun is the Fire Weather Program Leader and Incident Meteorologist for the National Weather Service office in Monterey, California since 2003. He received his degree in Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences from the University of Wisconsin in 1996. And currently he's on the teaching cadre for S590, the course taught at NAFRI in Tucson. And to date, he has worked as an incident meteorologist on over 40 wildfires in the western U.S. Welcome, Ryan.
Okay, hello, and can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'll assume that, yes. Okay, great. So, are you guys looking at my screen right now too, is that correct?
We see it now.
Okay, all right. So first of all, thanks from the Weather Service and myself for letting me be on this call. And I want to point out right away that it was kind of by dumb luck that Zeke and Carrie and I all got lined up. I was unaware of this until yesterday. So I did not pay Carrie to say all that stuff. But it's a great opportunity to speak to this group of people from reading the the initial call out for the different technical specialists and IMETs and LTANs. And I think it's a cool opportunity for us to kind of engage in a discussion or conversation. So I don't have any formal slides. I wanted to do it as more of a talking point, and I'm not aware of who everybody is that's on the call. From what I can tell, there's about 79 people, and I got to assume there's a lot of people from other parts of the country that don't care about California or Alaska. So I don't want it to become necessarily too Sobrane-centric, although I think it was an interesting wildfire this year. And I know the initial call out by Dan talked about how each season there's fires that go on in different parts of the country where we get a whole bunch of analysts who all kind of cycle through. And I think we had a lot of F-fans and L-fans and other technical specialists that came through the Sobranes, but I know there was the Pioneer Fire outside of Boise, and I think it was the Beaver Creek Fire up in northern Colorado that were some of these really long duration fires. So really it's interesting that Carrie had his talk, and quite frankly, he touched on a lot of the topics that I was interested in, and I had taken back to my kind of leadership within the Weather Service and said, hey, our jobs, our roles are changing. How do we as IMETs stay relevant? How do we keep training ourselves? How do we make ourselves available as the world is changing with technology and FS Pro and long-term analysts and the different tools that are out there and the different tools that the crews carry with them, meaning everyone has their iPhone and your morning IAP can become outdated in a couple hours. But in today's world, just like anybody can get their point and click information, so can a lot of the crews on the line, assuming they have cell phone information. But so I'm hoping that a lot of the people on here are the analysts, because what I'm trying to think of or going through my mind is how our jobs and our roles have changed. And I think there's opportunities for all of us as long-term analysts and fire behavior analysts and the air resource advisors to kind of work together. And I think the Sobranes fire was an example of that. But I think we also want to take the opportunity to stand back and make sure that we're all supporting each other. And I think we are, but I think sometimes we're all not aware what each person can bring to the table. So kind of in the spirit of this, Advanced Fire Learning Institute or unit, just to make sure that we each know what the other can bring. And I think a lot of that just comes through basic communication. Using the example with Carrie and the long-term analysts, for myself, I love working with the LTANs and diving into the data and giving that information. But I think it's incumbent on everybody who's out there, if you find yourself at an incident, maybe it's a type 2 team or something smaller or whatever the case may be, to make sure that you are speaking up and asking your IMET for input and asking what can you bring to the table, and if they're not bringing that to you, that you kind of clearly identify that. And one of the talking points is that some of the notes that I've written down here is during the Sobranes it obviously did get pretty hectic with our morning cycles with the strategic operations planner. And these are things that are somewhat new for the IMETs to be dealing with, and perhaps for all of us to be dealing with. And so I think that it's not necessarily challenges, but opportunities to make sure that we're all on the same page. I can only speak more so to California, but it a couple of years ago, we would always write 2 IAPs and have a day planning meeting and a night planning meeting, at least with the federal incidents, and that culture has seemed to have changed a little bit, where we're reassessing our workload and how we're doing our stuff. So I think the same things can happen with how we all get together and share information. And I think some of you, I'm sure, on this call have heard different talk about having an intelligence section or a fire behavior officer, and that type of discussion, where we really make sure we're all working together and sending home the same message. So I guess using the Sobranes as an example would be where that strategic operations planner working for the line officers or whatever, that their message is in coordination with what the short, medium, and long range weather suggests, that the long-term analyst, that their output is consistent with that message, and then of course the fire behavior analyst, both the short term and the next day or so, that we're all speaking the same message. And then quite frankly, this was the first time I'd worked with air resource advisors before, but this one we worked with air resource advisors for 90 days, and so that brought a new element to the table within the group. And I'm sure that we've all been on incidents where we kind of get divided up, where you have an LTAN down in this corner of another trailer hunkered away, and fire behavior analyst who's working out of his home office or whatever. And I think it's really important as there's more and more of these intelligence type people, that you can't replace face-to-face interactions and meetings. And I know on that Sobranes, and I'm pretty sure Tim's listening too, and we, early on we were in a pretty small trailer, and with Carrie and Jennifer and the air resource advisors, and we were reaching maximum capacity, but it was important that we stayed together as a unit to kind of share all that information. So those are just some general thoughts that I had, but I guess right now I view this as an opportunity for the people who I think are listening, as an opportunity to ask questions of me as an IMET, on behalf of the program, of the different things that we can bring to the table, because I think in my discussions with my fellow IMETs is sometimes we feel like we can be an underutilized resource as well, that we're there to help you and bring the different skill sets to the table, and it gets outside of this call, but with the public information officers, and quite frankly, even at times to be more embedded within operations, where we're able to give them more of the short-term analysis and that type of thing. And that did end up happening by the end of the Sobranes, and I can't even remember exactly when, late August through September, where at one point we reached, I think, about 5 IMETs on the fire, and that was for the most part a new paradigm that we hadn't done before, where we actually had on the west side of the fire on the coast, and on the east side where we had IMETs that were out there specifically just kind of embedded with operations, and they were only there focusing on a couple of the key divisions, and then back at the main ICP, or you could almost consider it a mini area command, those IMETs were doing more of the cooperators meeting, the IP component. So we changed some of our thinking and how we handled our business, just due to travel times and spike camps and that type of thing. So I think it was a unique fire that brought, like I said, a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities to the table. So I'm trying to, give me a second here while I'm just kind of looking through my notes here for the yeah, and I guess, and I'm not sure if it reaches this target group or not, but again, with the air resource advisors, that was an interesting And as much of this fire was burning in the wilderness, of course, the smoke was impacting high-value communities, shutting down the school district due to the smoke impacts, and billion-dollar car shows and stuff like that. So suddenly, as Carrie alluded to, we were kind of pulled in different directions between, dealing with a burn operation, a night operation. What's our 3 to 5 day window? What's our 2-week window? What's our 1 month window? So it can be kind of you kind of get pulled in different directions, and like everybody else on the incident, you're dealing with exhaustion and everything like that. And now a unique thing on a fire like this and the coast, where generally we're not dealing with any type of convective weather, we're not worried about thunderstorms. If you would throw that into the mix, you would really kind of be pushing the limits. We all kind of bring our own agendas and biases to the table, but one of the things that came out of this for me was that I think for the weather services, we need to look at more times at having multiple IMETs on an incident where you can kind of following some of the fire behavior analyst thing, where you almost have a field IMET who's out in the field kind of observing the fire and the wind and that type of thing, and then that person who's kind of back at camp dealing with the logistics and that type of thing. Just like that, you might have a couple plan sections chiefs or sit unit leaders or that type of thing. So, and again, realize that for us as meteorologists, we're coming in almost always, of course, we're a single resource. We're not tied to the team. We work for a complete different agency within the Department of Commerce, although our mission is saving lives and property. So we're not necessarily embedded in the culture the way that you guys are. So we're always trying to assimilate and help out, of course, in any way we can. But some of the cultural things that where we need help, I guess, or guidance perhaps at times. And so if you are that long-term analyst or fire behavior analyst, and it's a new IMET who's coming in from a different part of the country or a different state, to make sure that your directions or what you're expecting out of them are clear. And if it's, the YELTAN saying, hey, we need to meet every day from 10 to 10:30 to kind of go over some of the inputs, because I think you'll get a value-added impact if you give them a clear direction. And just like every IC or plans chief or analyst has a different skill set, of course, every IMET's going to have a different skill set. But if it's possible, are there any questions? Or I'd really like to encourage, I don't like to sit and listen to myself talk. I'd love to talk specifics about the Sobranes fire, or if anybody else has anything else that comes to the table, but where the IMET can help out. Questions that you have of what we can or cannot provide, what you see for us in the future, times where maybe an IMET has failed you, I don't know. So just some things to throw out there while I kind of take a drink of water here and catch my breath.
Well, Ryan, this is Dan Mindar, and Diane had to step out, so I'm going to be finishing up with the moderation. But I can think of several instances where the IMET was used in somewhat unique ways. I can see during burnout operations, I can think of an instance where the IMET was in operation pocket for several days during burnout operations. I can also think of an instance because of information that the fire information officers had shared with the public about, when we get these conditions, these things will happen. That the fire information officers were regularly hitting up the IMET for information. So I can think of a lot of different ways the IMETs are used on fires.
Right, and that definitely was happening with the Sobranes, and again, I think I can speak for most of the people in the program. They're gonna, I would say 9 times out of the 10, they're gonna want to be involved, in handling those public meetings, the media interviews, helping to give the inputs to the analysts for, the scenario that Carrie kind of went through, and some of the LTAN inputs there to make sure that we're all producing the best, possible product, and that we're all on the same page. I think that's kind of part of the angle that I'm getting at is kind of all of us working together as a team, the different intelligence, analysts, and, just working together as a team to produce the best product for the incident management team and the public as a whole. And I think there's always room for improvement on that, and making sure we're all in the same trailer and talking, and maybe even sometimes they'll have a planning section meeting where everybody gets to give their input, or perhaps even at a smaller level, or within our unit. When it gets bigger, on a typical fire, if it's just an IMET and a fire behavior analyst, obviously you have plenty of one-on-one time where you can bounce ideas off of each other. But using the Sobranes, and I'm sure other fires from this past season as an example, where that intelligence unit got so big where you kind of could become fractured just due to travel times and stuff like that.
Okay, it looks like we've got one hand raised. Tobin, Tammy, you want to unmute him and let him go ahead and ask his question?
Yep, I'm trying to unmute him, but there was no pin to click or send. Yeah, Tobin, I can't get you to unmute. Can you maybe type your question in? In the meantime, while we're trying to get Tobin to, if we can figure out how to get him unmuted, we have a couple of questions in the question box. One was from Jeff Shelton. With the number of exceptionally talented analysts in play, how often do differences of opinion surface? Hello? Hello? Hello?
All right, can you hear me now? Yeah, this is Ryan.
Yes.
Can you hear me now? All right,
yeah.
You guys had me. That was a bad sign when you had muted me. No, Jeff's question. I think Jeff's question was about differences of opinion with bringing different people to the door, and I think obviously human dynamics. I think there's a lot of proud people on this phone call, and it's normal. We all kind of feel each other out and ask people what's their experience, where are you from. Carrie walked in from Colorado, and I thought, huh? That's a joke. But so yeah, I think that's a learning curve for all of us, and even within the IMET program too, when you bring in multiple people, and we're all, of course, checking each other's experience. But that's where getting together and building the relationships and the trust, bringing in good trainees and giving them a good qualified experience, it helps with that. So I think that's something that we all have to work on. It's a small community. I think we recognize a lot of each other's names, through different groups that were on committees, that type of thing. So it's a small family. That's a part of the dynamic that comes into play, and I'd be interested in other people's input on that.
Great, thanks, Ryan. We have another question from Risa Lane Navarro. One thing that came up at the IMET workshop in Boise this past March is how to get the National Weather Service to buy into standards for IMETs going out in the field, and not just there at ICP. The thought was more on the physical fitness levels as compared to the brain levels. I would love to have a field IMET on fires to help get info back into ICP. As an F-man, I can only cover so much.
Yeah,
Any thoughts on
again,
that?
Yeah, this is Ryan again, and I think we were able to really test that later in the incident, where, as Carrie alluded, I think when he and I were working together, that was it. I think I had a trainee, but later on, we did, as the thing became more and more spread out, and we had, I believe, 4 qualified IMETs at one point, and 2 of them were essentially what we at least anecdotally called them field IMETs. They were really just there for the key burning along the North Coast Ridge Road as they dragged fire down the line, and then we had another guy embedded over on the east side He had no obligations to write a forecast. He carried the radio with him, and he literally was with the operations or the branch director for that branch, and with that person essentially in the truck all day, gathering intelligence. And that's one thing, a point that I'd like to make is, and even within our own agency, we've had these questions of, well, can we support the incidents from the office? And I give a strong no on that. The amount of intelligence that is picked up within the trailers and understanding what the goals of the team or the forest are is invaluable, and it's really important to keep your IMET engaged, share the water cooler talk, let them be a part of it and assimilate, and they will then be able to pick up on, you know, what is the key information. And so that this concept of a field IMET, I think is something worth exploring deeper, and you know, it's quite frankly, I think it's a route our agency wants to go in terms of being more involved in these types of incidents. And I think, you know, the second half of the Sobranes, we without realizing it, we kind of tested that theory.
Great, thanks, Ryan. What were events, this one is from Boyd Labita, what were the events or thresholds that prompted ordering additional IMETs for the Sobranes?
Yeah, that so real quickly, I think on Kerry's map that he showed up there, like earlier on August 7th or so. So the actual first week or 10 days when it did its really intense burning, that was in areas that did not have fire history on the state responsibility area. So that's when it made its, I think maybe the first 35,000 acres or so were roughly on the state land with pretty intense burning where there was an area of no fire history. And then once it hit wilderness boundaries, and you know, different strategies and tactics and had to be kind of employed then, you know, as the fire moved into the wilderness, that changed things. And we ended up, because the original camp was, for lack of a better, up near Salinas, travel times became a big issue. And one of the breaking points when we went to the multiple IMETs was what was originally kind of a spike camp down in Big Sur, turned into a full-fledged camp with night operations. Of course, they were trying to burn at night with the down canyon that showed up on that H3 RAWs. And it was physically impossible. There were so many public meetings that were going on, community meetings. And so we were being asked to be at a 6 o'clock planning meeting, a 6 o'clock community meeting, and a 6 o'clock night briefing, all at 3 different locations, which of course was you know, unsustainable given long travel times and everything else. So that was one of the key breaking points. And at least what we think we've figured out is really that the teams don't have a problem with bringing in additional IMETs. We just kind of have to break through some of the barriers, I think, within the culture of our own agency.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ryan. We have another question from Risa Lang-Navarro. On another note, have you used the mobile application developed by the University of Montana, the Landscape Fire Analysis Group, that allows crews to input weather data and send it to the IMET, as well as being archived at the University of Montana for future reference? It's listed within the app stores on both Google and Apple as the Fire Weather Calculator, and this app was developed by Jim Rittering, and it is a very useful application. Ryan, do you use that, or is that information shared amongst the IMET working group?
I can tell you again on the Sobranes, actually, I think at the peak we had about 40 field observers or FOBs right around August 10th or so, and they were using that, and that was huge for us because even though it was in the wilderness where most of them were hiking around, it was on the ridge lines and they had cell reception. And then that's when some of the initial you know, burnouts and whatnot were planned. They would use that, and we would immediately get that back. You know, I gave them my email, or the different analysts, they all had our emails. They would send that, and we were able to plot that in Google Earth, and that was a great app. That quite frankly, this summer was the first summer I used it, and I know chatting with other IMETs, I can't say all of them, but that folks use it, and the field observers, it's easy, and it gave great intelligence rather than having them bring that back to the field or back into the trailer at night with, you know, a dirty piece of paper or whatever. So yes, we did use that, and I'm sure other people in the trailer appreciated that as well. But that's a great app for sure.
That's really great information to have as your feedback, and if others have used that, I would encourage you to pass that on to Jim Rittering at the center, so perhaps we can get it a little bit more formalized.
Okay,
one more. Okay, great, thanks Ryan. We have another question from Tobin, since I couldn't unmute him earlier. His question is, the Kirk complex in 99 seemed to display similar effects with the marine layer and interior valley conditions. Was there much data or personal communication with folks who were on that fire with the Soberanus? This gets at the question is, how do we keep historical knowledge available?
I mean, the answer is anecdotally. I mean, of course, a lot of people that in 99 were on the Kirk were now, you know, later in their careers. And of course, you know, a lot of people had been there. You know, so the Kirk in 99 and the Basin and now this fire, they more or less used the same footprint, the same lines, and then the 1977 Marble Cone. So, you know, anecdotally, a lot of the same stories are there, the same information, the stories about the marine layer depth, and how that influenced fire behavior. I mean, we see that on our coastal fires. So, you know, I know at least within the IMET program, we've, you know, made a concerted effort in the last 10 to 15 years where, you know, our logs and our weather files, we do archive so that when the next IMET shows up, you know, the Basin was only in 2008, so it was only 8 years later, and we pull up, you know, the logs and the files. And I think and for the record, going back to Carrie's talk, those IRODs, 7 of the 8 are still deployed. The forest has gotten an agreement to keep them up through March 15th so we can monitor for debris flows. But those IRODs, that information is out there, and quite frankly, I believe the San Jose State Group is going to be looking a lot at that for some research on the incredible drying that goes on above the marine layer. So that's hopefully one way where we can get some of that past information. But yeah, I think we all know those anecdotal stories in the local fire history, but it's a different animal to have it archived. And now maybe with some of the FS Pro stuff or the WFDA stuff, where some of this stuff is you can bring up some of the past fires and the fire growth days and that type of thing.
Okay, thanks Ryan. That's the last of the questions that I see in the queue at